The papers hit the marble floor like a verdict, scattered, white, final. Kang and Sue stood in the center of their glass-walled penthouse 50 floors above a rain-soaked Seoul, and he smiled. Not because he was happy, because he thought he'd already won. "Sign them," he said, his voice so calm it was almost bored. "Or don't. Doesn't matter. Either way, you're done." Rachel Moore didn't move. She stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows in that cream-wrap dress. Silk, spotless, cutting a silhouette against the storm, one hand resting on her hip like she was posing for a painting nobody commissioned. Her hair pulled back, jaw set, eyes still, not scared still, not shocked still, the kind of still that belongs to something that doesn't need to move yet. Sue stepped closer, fingers closing around her wrist. Hard. The kind of grip that was a message, not an accident. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," he said. "You think I don't see what you're doing? The quiet act, the sad eyes?" He laughed, short and sharp. "You've got nothing, Rachel. You've always had nothing. And the second you sign those papers, the whole world's gonna know it." She let him finish. She actually let him finish. Then, slowly, without pulling her wrist back, without raising her voice, without a single dramatic gesture, she turned her head toward the window. 50 floors down, the rain-slicked streets were filling up, one by one, then 5, then 10. Black SUVs, silent, massive, deliberate, rolling in from every direction, headlights cutting through the downpour like eyes opening in the dark. Sue saw them too. His grip loosened. "Who?" he started. Rachel finally looked at him. And the expression on her face, calm, almost gentle, the way a surgeon looks right before the first cut, that's when his blood ran cold. So look, Sue thought he built an empire. And you know what? On paper, he kinda did. The connections, the boardrooms, the offshore accounts moving millions before breakfast. He had it all. What he didn't have, what guys like him never have, is the self-awareness to ask, who's actually holding the foundation? And here's something most people don't know. In real, organized crime structures, the most dangerous person in the room is almost never the loudest one. Historians call it the shadow principle, the anonymous power behind the visible figure who quietly controls every resource while everyone watches the front man take bows. Rachel Moore wasn't a kept wife. She was the architect. She'd spent years moving money, pulling strings, building an underworld empire from the shadows, all while Sue stood in the spotlight thinking he was the story. She dressed it down, stayed quiet, played broke, not because she was weak, but because she was testing him, giving him every opportunity to be the man she married. He failed, spectacularly, and tonight was the last open door. He walked right past it, threw divorce papers at it, and grabbed her wrist, trying to break her. He had no idea what was already in motion. If you leave right now, you'll never find out what Rachel says when the most feared Mafia boss in Seoul kneels at her feet. And trust me, you don't want to be the one who missed it. So hit subscribe and stay. Because the ending of this story is the kind of thing you'll be quoting for weeks, and you already made it this far. So let's back up, because you need to understand exactly who Kang Soo thought he was before all of this went sideways. The man didn't just walk into a room, he arrived. Every morning he'd stand at those floor-to-ceiling windows in his penthouse, 50 floors above Seoul, coffee in hand, watching the city like he personally built it. And he'd get this look on his face. You know the look. That slow, satisfied smirk that rich guys get when they've confused luck with genius. You see that building? he told Rachel one evening, pointing at a glass tower cutting through the skyline. I closed that deal in 48 hours. 48. While other guys were still reading the paperwork, I was already collecting. He didn't even look at her when he said it, just spoke into the air like she was furniture that occasionally needed to be updated on his achievements. Rachel had been sitting at the kitchen island, going through what appeared to be a magazine. She turned a page, said nothing. That was the thing about Insoo. He never needed a response. He needed an audience. And Rachel, quiet, composed, perpetually unbothered Rachel, had played that role so perfectly for 3 years that he'd stopped seeing her as a person and started seeing her as a backdrop. My partners in Tokyo called this morning, he continued, loosening his cufflinks like the motion itself was a power move. Yamamoto's group. You know what they said? They said, Izzy. And I'm quoting here, is Kang. You're the only man in this region we trust with real numbers. The only man. He finally glanced at her. You understand what that means? She turned another page. It means we don't have money problems anymore, Rachel. I don't have money problems. He tilted his head slightly, the way someone does right before they say something deliberately cruel. Well, you've never had money, so I guess that tracks. And there it was. That little dig. The one he liked to sneak in sideways, casual, like it wasn't a dig at all, just a fact he was generously reminding her of. Rachel Moore, the woman who showed up to this marriage with a modest background, no family empire, no corporate surname. Insoo had made sure she never forgot it. Not loudly, not with screaming, just consistently, like water eroding stone. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Rachel had stopped reacting to it a long time ago, not because she was broken, because she'd already decided. Here's something that'll hit different when you hear it. Forensic accountants who investigate financial crime say the most sophisticated money operations in the world don't look sophisticated at all from the outside. They look boring, quiet, unremarkable, because the people running them need you to look away. Rachel Moore had been unremarkable for 3 years, deliberately, surgically, unremarkably unremarkable. While Insoo was in Tokyo shaking hands and taking bows, Rachel was 3 time zones away at a desk in a private server room on the 14th floor of a building nobody associated with her name, moving numbers that would have made those Tokyo partners go pale. Here's what nobody, not Insoo, not his lawyers, not his so-called underworld connections, understood. The offshore companies funding Insoo's entire operation, the shell accounts that backed his real estate deals, his imports, his introductions to the right rooms. They didn't belong to any of the men whose names were on the paperwork. They belonged to Rachel, not linked to Rachel, not adjacent to Rachel, hers, sitting underneath 7 layers of corporate structuring and nominee directors across 4 different countries, traced through jurisdictions specifically chosen because cross-border financial investigations between them take, on average, 11 years to resolve. She hadn't stumbled into this. She'd engineered it. Her phone, the secondary one, matte black, no case, would buzz at odd hours. Never long messages, just numbers. Confirmations, approvals, sometimes a single word, done. And she'd respond just as briefly, already knowing what came next, already 3 moves ahead of every person who thought they were playing the game. The Korean underworld has a term for someone like Rachel, Garimja, shadow, not the person who holds the sword, the person who decides whether the sword gets picked up at all. She'd built that reputation quietly, methodically, over the course of a decade before Insoo even knew her name. By the time they married, She'd already decided she was going to give him a chance to be something real, a genuine partner, someone who could know the truth about her and still choose loyalty over greed. She'd hidden everything, played small, let him believe he was the architect, and she waited. 3 years, y'all. 3 years she waited to see who he really was. The night it unraveled started like a lot of bad nights do, with a dinner that went a little too well. In-soo came home from a meeting in Gangnam looser than usual. Not drunk. In-soo didn't get drunk, he considered it beneath him. But comfortable. The kind of comfortable that makes people say things they've been practicing in their head for weeks. He poured himself a drink, set his jacket over the back of a chair and said, "We should talk." Rachel looked up from her laptop. "Okay." He didn't sit. He walked to the window. Always the window with this man, like the city below was a prop he needed for dramatic effect. And he said, "My business partners have some concerns. About optics." He chose the word carefully. You could tell. "About the kind of woman I'm with." Rachel closed the laptop, slowly. "Yamamoto's group, the Shin Family Consortium, the people I'm building with. They come from a certain world, Rachel. They have expectations. And, He cleared his throat, which was the closest In-soo ever got to discomfort. "They've been pretty direct with me about wanting to see a different kind of partnership at my side." "A different kind?" she repeated. "Someone with... Look, I'm not trying to be ugly about this." "Then don't be." "Someone with connections, family money, a name that opens doors in the right circles." He finally turned from the window. "You're a good woman, Rachel. I mean that. But you don't fit. And I've been trying to make it work for a long time, and I just..." He exhaled, spreading his hands like he was presenting a business case. "I can't keep carrying the weight of that gap, you know?" The silence in that penthouse was extraordinary. Outside, the rain had started. Soft at first, just a murmur against the glass, Seoul washing itself clean 50 floors below. Inside, not a single thing moved. Rachel looked at him for a long moment, then she said very quietly, "So this is what you chose?" In-soo blinked. "What?" "Nothing." She opened her laptop back up. "Keep going." He stared at her, something flickering behind his eyes. Not guilt, exactly. More like irritation. The kind you feel when someone won't perform their scene correctly. He'd clearly expected more. Tears, maybe. Bargaining. The desperate energy of a woman who thought she had nowhere to go. He got a woman opening her laptop. It threw him off just enough to push him further. He brought the papers the following evening. Not a lawyer, not a formal meeting, just papers. Printed, paper-clipped, dropped on the kitchen island like a grocery receipt. "I had my team draw these up," he said. "Standard dissolution. You'll get a settlement. It's fair." Rachel picked them up, read the first page, set them back down. "Fair," she said. "Considering you came into this with nothing," he started. "In-soo." "I think it's more than generous, actually." "In-soo." He stopped. She looked at him the way you look at something you've already made peace with losing. Not sad, not angry, just clear, like a sky right after a storm sweeps through. "You really believe that," she said. "Don't you? You genuinely believe you built all of this." "I did build all of this." She almost smiled. "Not quite." "Okay." That okay detonated something in him. You could see it, the jaw tighten, the shoulders square, the entire carefully constructed image of the composed, powerful businessman starting to crack at the seams. Because here's the thing about men like In-soo. They can handle opposition. They can handle anger, pushback, even contempt. What they cannot handle is being dismissed, and Rachel's calm was the purest form of dismissal he'd ever experienced. He crossed the room in 4 steps, grabbed the papers off the counter and threw them at her feet. Not handed. Threw. Papers scattering across that cold marble floor like debris. "Sign them," he said, and his voice had dropped into something low and controlled and genuinely dangerous. "Tonight, I'm done being patient." She didn't look at the papers. He stepped closer. His hand closed around her wrist, tight, deliberate, a grip that said, "I am reminding you of the difference in our positions." His face was inches from hers. "You think your silence scares me? You think that little act?" He laughed, short and hollow. "You think any of this changes what you are? You're nobody, Rachel. You've always been nobody, and I have been generous to you. So sign the papers, take what I'm offering, and disappear." Rachel looked down at his hand on her wrist. Then she looked up at him. And this is the part that would have made anyone in that room go cold. She didn't look afraid. She didn't look hurt. She looked like she was checking a clock, like she was simply confirming that yes, it was time. The thing she'd been waiting for was finally here. And now they could move on to what came next. "Let go of my wrist," she said. Not loud, not shaking, just final. Insu's grip tightened. Or what? From somewhere deep in the building, then closer, then right there, came the sound of an elevator opening. The first one through the door didn't announce himself. None of them did. 6 men, black suits, moving with the kind of coordinated quiet that doesn't come from corporate security training. This was something older than that. Something that understood weight and consequence and exactly where to stand in a room so that every exit was covered without anyone having to say a word. They spread out along the walls of the penthouse like they'd memorized the floor plan because they had. And they said absolutely nothing. Insu let go of Rachel's wrist. "Hey," he started, was turning toward them with the automatic authority of a man used to commanding rooms. "Who authorized? What is this? Who sent you?" He looked at the nearest one directly, the tone he used for staff, for subordinates, for anyone whose job it was to respond to him. "I'm talking to you. Who sent you?" The man stared straight ahead, not through Insu, not dismissively, just past him, like Insu was an architectural feature, a wall, something permanently present and entirely irrelevant. Insu's voice climbed. Hey, I said, "They're not here for you." Rachel's voice, calm, matter of fact. She hadn't moved from where she stood. She was looking out the window now, and if you followed her gaze, you'd see what she was looking at. The streets below, rain-slicked, gleaming 50 floors down, were filling up. Black SUVs. One then another. Then a convoy of them moving in from 3 different directions with the unhurried precision of something that had been planned well in advance. Headlights cutting through the storm, engines silent from this height, but you could feel them, the weight of that many vehicles, that many people, all pointed at one address. Insu walked to the window. He counted, you could see him counting, and his face changed in a way that faces don't usually change in front of other people. The color leaving it, the confidence curdling into something else, something that looked a lot like the early pre-verbal stages of "oh no." Rachel. His voice was different now, the authority stripped out of it. "Rachel, who are these people? What did you do?" She turned from the window. Why? And she looked at him the way a chess player looks at a board after the final move. Not triumphant, not gloating, just done, just resolved. You asked me what I was, she said. You've been asking me that for 3 years. She glanced at the papers scattered across the floor. I figured it was time you got an answer. The commentary almost writes itself here, doesn't it? Look, In-soo had every resource, every connection, the right suits, the right rooms, the right names in his phone, and he still missed the most fundamental rule of every power structure that's ever existed. The person who controls the money controls everything else. He'd been so busy watching the spotlight, he never once thought to look at who was paying the electric bill. Rachel Moore wasn't a broke wife. She was the reason the lights were on. Would and the 50 black SUVs outside? They weren't coming to collect a debt. They were coming to pay their respects. Don't you dare close this tab, because what happens when that elevator opens one more time and the most feared man in Seoul's underworld walks past In-soo like he's invisible? That scene is coming, and it is going to hit different than anything you've watched this week. Stay right here. The elevator opened one more time, and the penthouse, already tense, already loaded with the kind of silence that precedes something irreversible, went so still you could hear the rain streaking down the glass. Park Do-yeon walked in like he owned the air in the room. And look, if you don't know that name, that's the point. The people who actually run things in Seoul's underworld don't show up in newspapers. They don't do interviews. They don't have a Wikipedia page or a verified social media account. What they have is a reputation that travels faster than any press release ever could. The kind of reputation where, when someone says the name in the right room, everybody gets very quiet and very careful all at once. Park Do-hyun was 61 years old, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal overcoat that probably cost more than most people's cars. He moved unhurried, not slow, unhurried, the way people move when they've never once had to rush for anyone in their entire lives. 2 men flanked him. Neither of them looked at anything except the exits. In-soo's whole face rearranged itself. The fear was gone, snapped off like a switch, replaced instantly by that performance he did so well, the confident smile, the squared shoulders. The I knew you'd show up energy of a man who'd convinced himself he was important enough to warrant this kind of visit. Do-hyun-si. He stepped forward, hand already extended. Finally, I've been trying to reach your office for... Listen, we need to talk about the Incheon deal because my partners are getting antsy and I told them you and I had an understanding. Park Do-hyun walked past him, not around him, past him. The way you walk past a plant in a hallway, the way you move through a space that contains an obstacle that you've already mentally categorized as not worth acknowledging. In-soo's hand hung in the air. His smile didn't fall immediately. It lagged, the way a signal does when something's been cut off but the last frame is still displaying. Then slowly, it dropped. Park Do-yeon crossed the penthouse in 12 steps. 12 deliberate, unhurried steps. He stopped in front of Rachel Moore, this woman in a cream dress with her hair pulled back and dried blood still faint on her chin and not a single trace of surprise on her face. And he bowed. Not a nod. Not a tilt of the head. A bow. Deep, formal, the kind that in Korean culture carries the full weight of hierarchy and reverence, and I recognize exactly who you are. Aeoni. He used the honorific without a flicker of hesitation. We came as soon as the signal reached us. I apologize for the delay. Rachel dipped her head once. You're not late. Is there anything you need handled tonight? Not yet. She glanced, just barely, just a fraction, in In-soo's direction. Give me a few minutes. Of course. He straightened, clasped his hands behind his back, and stepped to the side of the room. Present, patient, waiting. And that right there, that moment, is the one that broke Kang In-soo. Not the papers, not the guards ignoring him, not even the convoy of 50 SUVs in the street below. That moment. Watching the most feared man in Seoul's criminal infrastructure bow to his wife, like she was the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and he was grateful just to be in the same room. In-soo stood in the middle of his own penthouse, the one with his name on the lease, his art on the walls, his whiskey on the counter. And for the first time in maybe his entire life, because he had absolutely no idea what to say. "What?" he started, stopped. "What is this?" Rachel turned to face him fully now. There was no performance in her expression, no satisfaction, no gloating, no dramatic pause for effect. Just the quiet composure of someone who has been carrying a truth for a very long time and has finally set it down. "Sit down, In-soo." "I don't want to sit down. I want to know what—" "Sit down." He sat. Here's what Rachel told him, and I need y'all to really hear this, because this is where the story stops being about drama and starts being about something real. She told him about Jeju Holdings, the parent company he thought was backed by a Japanese investment group, hers. She told him about the Meridian Trust accounts in Singapore, the ones his lawyers had spent 2 years trying to trace back to an anonymous European stakeholder, hers. She told him about the silent equity stake in the Gangnam development deal that made his name in Seoul's real estate world 6 years ago. The one that came through at the last minute from an unnamed third-party guarantor. Hers. "Every deal you closed," she said. "Every room you got into, every handshake that mattered. Someone opened that door before you got there. Someone made sure the numbers worked. Someone put your name in front of the right people and quietly removed the obstacles." She paused. "That was me. That was always me." In-soo was shaking his head. No, you can't. I've got the documentation." She said it so simply, so flatly, like she was confirming a restaurant reservation. "Every transfer, every nominee signature, every shell company traced back to the account I set up before we ever met. Your lawyers can verify it. So can the Shin families. So can Yamamoto's group." A beat. "So can Do-hyun's people." She glanced at Park Do-hyun. He nodded once. Confirmed. And In-soo, this man who'd stood at windows looking down at a city he thought he'd conquered, made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Something between a breath and a question, collapsing in the middle before it could become either one. Now here's the educational part, and pay attention, because this is real. In international financial law, the legal concept of beneficial ownership means that the true owner of an asset is whoever controls it, not necessarily whoever's name is on the paperwork. It's the reason entire empires have been unraveled in courtrooms when the real beneficial owner finally surfaces. Rachel hadn't just built something, she'd built it in a way that was legally ironclad. In-soo's name was on everything visible and owned absolutely nothing that mattered. The paperwork was a costume. Rachel was the person wearing the actual crown. His phone rang at 11:47 p.m., the Shin family's corporate secretary. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 11:52, Yamamoto's personal assistant, calling from Tokyo, which, given the time difference, meant somebody had been woken up specifically to make this call. He stared at the screen. By midnight, his inbox had 17 unread emails. By 12:15, it was 43. He stepped away from Rachel, not dramatically, not storming off, just drifting. The way a person moves when their body is operating on autopilot because their brain is currently offline, and answered the next call. The voice on the other end didn't waste time. "Kang, we need to talk about the nature of your involvement in our shared projects." "I'm handling it," Insu said, and even he seemed to hear how hollow that sounded. "Our legal team has been in contact with a representative of Jeju Holdings. The representative has indicated that the beneficial ownership documentation is being released to all current partners by morning." A pause. "We're going to need to restructure." "Restructure? The partnership, Kang. We're going to need to restructure the partnership." Another pause. Colder this time. "Effective immediately." The call ended. He stood there, suit slightly rumpled now, amidst the careful architecture of his appearance starting to come undone at the edges, and looked down at the phone in his hand like it had just said something in a language he didn't recognize. 3 more calls came in the next 20 minutes. 2 he answered. 1 he couldn't. By 1 a.m., the Shin Family Consortium had sent a formal letter. A letter hand-delivered by a courier who arrived at the building's lobby with a sealed envelope and very specific instructions about who was and was not to receive it. The letter was addressed to Rachel. The doorman brought it up personally. "Look, this is the part of the story where someone usually starts begging. And Insu, to whatever small credit he has left at this point in the narrative, didn't exactly beg. But he did cross the room back to Rachel. And he did lower his voice in a way that was probably meant to sound like sincerity, but came out somewhere closer to desperation. Rachel. Her name in his mouth sounded different now, lighter, like he was handling something fragile that he'd previously been throwing around. "Listen. Okay, listen. Whatever you think He exhaled, ran a hand through his hair. I didn't know the extent of—" "Yes, you did," she said. You didn't know the details," she said patiently. "But you knew something was holding your empire together that wasn't you. You felt it every time a deal came through cleaner than it should have, every time a door opened that you hadn't knocked on." She tilted her head slightly. "You just decided not to ask questions because the answers might have complicated things." He opened his mouth, closed it, because she wasn't wrong, and some part of him, buried under 3 years of carefully maintained arrogance, knew it. "So what now?" he asked finally, and for just a second, genuinely, he just looked tired, like the performance had finally cost him more than he had left. "What do you want?" Rachel looked at him for a long moment. "I wanted you to be someone worth knowing," she said. "That's what I wanted." She picked up the sealed letter from the counter, glanced at it, set it back down. "But you don't get to have what you want just because you want it. And, neither do I, apparently." She almost smiled, brief, a little sad, then gone. "So, what happens now is you leave." It wasn't a dramatic removal. That's the thing. No shouting, no physical altercation, no scene. The 2 of Rachel's security team, the ones who'd been standing along the walls like architectural features for the past hour, simply moved to stand near Insu with the calm, professional patience of people who do this regularly and feel nothing about it either way. "Sir," the taller one said. "That's all, just, sir." The full weight of the sentence communicated in a single word. Insu looked at them, looked at Rachel, looked around the penthouse, at the art on the walls, the whiskey on the counter, the rain-streaked windows showing soul glittering 50 floors below, the city he thought he'd conquered laid out like a prize he'd earned. He picked up his jacket. He picked up his phone. He didn't pick up the divorce papers. And he walked, slowly, upright, with the last scraps of dignity a man can carry when everything else has already left the room, toward the elevator. Rachel didn't watch him go. She'd already turned toward the window. Park Do-hyun waited until the elevator doors closed before speaking. "Do you want the accounts unfrozen tonight or in the morning?" "Morning's fine," Rachel said. "Let everything settle." He nodded. "And the penthouse?" "Have the paperwork transferred back to the primary holding before business hours." She looked at the city below, calm, unbothered, like someone watching familiar weather. "He can collect his personal belongings next week. Give him a reasonable window." "Generous," Do-hyun said quietly. "Not really." She exhaled slowly. "I just don't need to be ugly about it." The elevator stopped on the lobby floor, and Kang and Sue walked out of the building into the rain. And y'all, this is the image I need you to sit with for a second. This man, in his expensive dark gray suit, standing in the rain outside a building that just rejected him. 50 black SUVs still lining the surrounding streets, their engines running, their occupants waiting for a signal that had nothing to do with him. Doormen who'd spent 3 years nodding at him now looking past him at the convoy with quiet deference. The city that he'd stood above every morning and claimed as his own, still there, still lit up, completely indifferent to his presence in a way cities always are, because the city was never his. He'd just been borrowing the view. His phone was still ringing. He stood there in the rain, holding it, and didn't answer. 40 minutes later, Rachel was still at the window. The SUVs had started to clear. Park Do-hyun and his men had moved to the lower floors to handle logistics. The penthouse was quiet. Finally, genuinely quiet. Just Rachel and the rain and Seoul doing what Seoul does, which is keep moving regardless of what any individual person thinks they've won or lost inside it. The elevator opened one more time. In Sue. He'd come back up, which, you know what, that tracks. Men like Insu always come back for one more line, one more thing they needed to say, one more attempt to make the story end differently than it did. Rachel didn't turn around. "I built a life here," he said. His voice was different in a way that couldn't be faked, stripped of the performance, just raw and a little broken and real in a way he hadn't been in years. "Whatever you say about the money, about the companies, I worked, I showed up, I built relationships. That wasn't you, that was me." She let him have that for a moment. Just let it exist in the room. Then she turned around. "You're right," she said. "You did work, and I'm not taking that away from you." She walked slowly toward him, not aggressively, just closing the distance until they were standing close enough to speak quietly. "But working inside a structure that someone else built and maintained, that's not the same as building. And you knew the difference, Insu. Deep down, you've always known." He looked at her. This woman he'd spent 3 years dismissing, diminishing, treating like a backdrop. And for the first time, he was actually looking at her. Like the image had finally resolved into something he could see clearly. "So what was this?" he asked. "All of it. The marriage, what was this to you?" Rachel was quiet for a moment. "A question," she said finally. "I wanted to know who you really were, whether you'd choose loyalty when it cost you something, whether the man I married was real." She glanced down briefly, then back up. "You answered the question." She walked past him, back to the window. "This was never your life, Insu." Her voice was quiet, matter-of-fact, final. "It was mine. I just let you live in it." The elevator doors opened behind her. She didn't look back. He left, for real this time, and the rain outside kept falling and Seoul kept glowing, and 50 floors up, A woman in a cream dress stood at a window she actually owned and let out the slowest, quietest breath. Not of triumph, not of satisfaction, but of resolution. The kind you feel when something that needed to be finished is finally, irrevocably, done. So here's what this story's really about. And I mean really about underneath the mafia bosses and the offshore accounts and the absolutely cinematic power shift. It's about the danger of borrowed power, of building your entire identity on a foundation you didn't lay and never bothered to examine. Psychologists call it reflected glory, the tendency to derive your sense of power and worth entirely from proximity to someone or something greater than yourself without ever developing a genuine source of your own. In-Soo didn't lose an empire. He was reminded that he never had one. And that's a different kind of loss, the kind that doesn't leave bruises on the outside. Rachel didn't win because she was ruthless. She won because she was patient. Because she understood something In-Soo never did, that real power doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. And when the moment comes, it doesn't rush. The illusion of power is the most dangerous kind, because the day it breaks, it doesn't just fall. It takes everything you thought you were with it. If this story hit different for you, and I think it did, hit that like button right now, because this channel is built for people who want drama that actually makes you think. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because we've got more stories where Rachel came from. And drop a comment below. Tell me, did In-Soo deserve a second chance, or did Rachel make exactly the right call? I read every single one. Let's talk about it. About